So now we shall discuss briefly. As far as the relationship of religion and politics is concerned, we shall touch upon the role of religion in mobilizing the national movements and also in comparing different types of national movements. So like other social factors like caste, language, gender, region, religion also is an important factor. So religion plays an important role in influencing the social process of the humankind, and also vice versa. Humankind also started influencing the religious trends in a society. In a democratic state like India, religion constitutes the core of the traditional society. କାରଣ ଟ୍ରାଡିସନାଲ ସୋସାଇଟିରେ ରିଲିଜନର ଇମ୍ପୋର୍ଟାନ୍ସ ବହୁତ ଅଧିକା ଥିଲା। ଯେମିତିକି ଆମେ ଦେଖିଲେ ଇନ୍ ୱେଷ୍ଟର୍ଣ୍ଣ ୱାର୍ଲଡରେ ପୋପଙ୍କ ଇନଫ୍ଲୁଏନ୍ସ, ଇକ୍ଲିଜିଆଷ୍ଟିକାଲ ଅଥରିଟିର ଇନଫ୍ଲୁଏନ୍ସ, ତେଣୁ ତାପରେ ପରେ ଆପଣ ଦେଖିଥିବେ ସେଇଥିପାଇଁ ୱେଷ୍ଟର୍ଣ୍ଣ ଥିଙ୍କର ମାନଙ୍କ ଭିତରେ ଥ୍ୟୁ ଅଫ୍ ଟୁ ସୋର୍ସ, ଯେ ରାଜାଙ୍କ ପାଖରେ ମଧ୍ୟ ଗୋଟେ ସୋର୍ଡ ରହିବା ଦରକାର। ଇଟ୍ ମଷ୍ଟ ବି କେପ୍ଟ ସେପାରେଟ୍। କିନ୍ତୁ ଆମର ଆନ୍ସିଏଣ୍ଟ ଇଣ୍ଡିଆରେ ମଧ୍ୟ କୌଟିଲ୍ୟଙ୍କର ଅର୍ଥଶାସ୍ତ୍ର କୁହନ୍ତୁ, ମନୁଙ୍କର ମନୁସଂହିତା କୁହନ୍ତୁ, if you go in detail with those literatures, we shall find influence of religion in administration. So in ancient India, definitely religion was very important. And so as the medieval and modern India is also concerned, religion also plays important role. It continues to play, for example, influencing the mass movements. And also the very close relationship between the religion and the various political groups. We shall find that there is a tendency nowadays, because of the democratization, because of the role played by the political parties during election, because you know their motive is how to get power. Election रे रहे केमती पार्टी तांकर पावर को आसियो एवं ସେମାନେ गवर्नमेंट प्रोडक्शन करियो. So like caste, they also appeal various religious groups. ସେଥି ଆମେ previous chapter ରେ ପଢିଛେ ଅନେକ political parties ମଧ୍ୟ religious sentiment ଉପରେ ମଧ୍ୟ grow କଲା. So the religious organizations, they interact with the political groups and they try to maximize their support base. ସେମାନେ ଗୋଟେ ନିର୍ଦ୍ଦିଷ୍ଟ religious group ପୁରା support ନେବାକୁ ଚାହିଁଲେ, କାରଣ ଆମର ହିନ୍ଦୁ ମେଜରିଟି କୁହନ୍ତୁ ବା ଅଦର ମାଇନରିଟି ରିଲିଜିୟସ୍ ଗ୍ରୁପ୍ସ କୁହନ୍ତୁ, ସେମାନଙ୍କ ସପୋର୍ଟଟାକୁ ଗାଲଭାନାଇଜ କରିବା ପାଇଁ ଅନେକ ପଲିଟିକାଲ ପାର୍ଟିଜ ମଧ୍ୟ ଗ୍ରୋ କଲେ. So now we have come to a point where religion and politics, they cannot be kept apart. They cannot be kept in strict watertight compartmentalizations. ତାଙ୍କୁ ଆମେ ଆଉ strictly ଅଲଗା କିଛି ଗୋଟେ watertight compartment ରଖିପାରିବା ନାହିଁ. ବର୍ତ୍ତମାନ ଗୋଟେ ପଲିଟିକ୍ସ ଆମେ ଗୋଟେ ଏମିତି ଏରାରେ ପହଞ୍ଚିଛେ where politics is not something just confined to party politics or election. It is much broader. It is about defining the notion of selfhood. formation of nation, mobilization of the national movements, anti-colonial movements, and also representation. So religion has really entered into a wider, it has ushered into milder arena, covering just not party politics or election. Beyond that, there are many other phenomena being covered under this. You know, a lot of literatures they have been developed, particularly after 1990s, on this broad intellectual and cultural traditions, including religious revivalism. And the broad features are available in the literatures addressed in the ICSR research surveys and explorations in political science on Indian political thought. Religious politics can mean, firstly, a situation where religion itself becomes the basis of political articulation and of defining the purpose of politics. And secondly, this refers to a condition where religion is used as the foundation for the political mobilization of the people. You know, the various organizations, various festivals, and many other things connected with religion, they become the basics of making political appeals to the people. For example, the use of the temples and mosques or a religious festival, for example, like Ganesh Puja, Sarvajanin Durga Puja, they have been used for political mobilization of the people. This is one example of religious politics. Then this concept of religion and politics also, it has another reference. It refers to the problem of what ought to be the relation between the two. And on the other hand, it involves the question of secularism, how one is oriented to it. And because our society is a multi-religious society, like multicultural, multi-caste and all that, it's a multi-religious society. Secularism denotes what kind of relationship should exist between religion and politics. Some argue that secularism denotes a separation between religion and politics. But some others, they argue that religion and politics cannot be separated. Rather, the state policy should be evolved in such a way that they can operate in a very collaborative way. That is the secularism in a positive sense of the term. It promotes all religions. That is why secularism, negatively speaking, it may be, it is not necessarily an antagonistic sphere between or among various religions. Rather, it should be interpreted in a very positivistic spirit. And state policies have been directed to make necessary arrangements so that the various religions in the state must act in a very collaborative way. And state has no official religion. For example, the state is not identifying itself with any religion. So there is no state religion, like a theocracy. In theocratic states, they have a state religion. Think in terms of the neighborhood country, Islam, Pakistan, that is an Islamic state. So Islam is a state religion. But even though Hinduism is a majority religion in our case, we have not given it the status of a state religion. So it is, secularism means impartial in matters of, in religious matters. So even though some argue that secularism denotes separation between religion and politics, and others argue that religion and politics cannot be separated, the secular quality of our state, our democracy, makes things clear as to how to deal with matters of religion. In the past 30 years after independence in our country, the relation between politics and religion was of a different kind than it was, than what it was now. The religion actually was of marginal importance for politics. Politics automatically religious clause ରୁ ପ୍ରିଥିଲା, କାରଣ ଧର୍ମ ରିଲିଜନ କୁ ମାର୍ଜିନାଲ ଇମ୍ପୋର୍ଟାନ୍ସ ଦିଆହଉଥିଲା। କିନ୍ତୁ 1980 ଦଶକ ପରେ mid 1980s, it has drastically changed in a way that Hindutva as an ideology has become a dominant force in the society. And 1980s, it is for Hindutva as a dominant force, it has emerged. So the very relationship between the politics and religion, it has undergone a change. So the question of how to look at the relationship between religion and politics in terms of constitutional ideals, it has changed. So issues centered on secularism, civil rights, citizenship, democracy, these issues, they do not evoke the same response from the Hindutva as this came to mean in the course of the freedom struggle. So as the distinction between politics and religion, it has collapsed in one form of nationalism and political appeals through religious symbols. Naturally, we feel the importance of religion in the present day society because political parties, they appeal various religious groups for their support base, both during the time of election and also after the election. So religious politics has provided the sum and substance and also agenda of politics now. ବର୍ତ୍ତମାନ କ୍ୱେଶ୍ଚନ ହେଉଛି ଗୋଟେ ରିଲିଜିୟସ୍ କମ୍ୟୁନିଟି ଭିତରେ ଗୋଟେ ଇଣ୍ଡିଭିଜୁଆଲର ପୋଜିସନଟା କ'ଣ? It is being defined by the present trend. And side by side, it also explains that what kind of a relationship should be there between different religious communities within a religious community. And also, what should be the status of various groups inside the society. For example, the status of a women group in the religious communities. Religious politics actually cannot be simultaneously be the religious, politics of the Hindus or politics of Muslims or politics of Christians. It can only belong to and may have appeal for the followers of one or the other religion. So the politics which tries to defend what is taken to be Muslim identity, or the politics that works towards creating a new and different identity for the Hindus, as is happening now, it cannot obviously appeal to another community. So a mere appeal to religion does not necessarily lead to religious politics. For example, one may be a Hindu, but the version or the interpretation of Hinduism one subscribes to will determine the substance of politics. So different thinkers, they have expressed different views and notions on religious politics. For example, you see, from our recent past, we can take some examples. Gandhi and Savarkar both believe that religion should inform politics, but their version of what it means to be a Hindu were different. Gandhi's view was that spiritual values should influence politics. Naturally, से कहले morality और politics को अलग करी परिवानी, कारण तांकर जो concept थला अहिंसा, सत्याग्रह, these are all based on morality. So Gandhi's version was that morality के हमें politics को में अलग करी परिवानी. If we do so, then there shall be a degenerating force inside politics that should lead to rampant corruption in politics. So spiritual values should influence politics according to Gandhi. Politics ta corrupt hejibo, impoverished hejibo. So he took a very inclusive view of both religion and politics. So Gandhi's view of substantive democracy in India through concept of Purna Swaraj or Ramarajya reflects this view. Gandhi drew, of course, a great deal of his values from Hinduism, but that didn't exhaust his spiritual source. He therefore never used any religious festival or dogma for political mobilization. As it was with case of some of the leaders of the Congress, those who have used, for example, Ganesh festival for mobilization. So this is the stand taken by Gandhi on the relationship between religion and politics, or particularly morality and politics. But in contrast, Savarkar, he thought that instead of spiritual values, it should be the race and ancestry, history and tradition, and sacredness of the land of Hindus, Punya Bhumi, which should be the basis of the Hindu view of politics. So he thought that only those whose religion has its origin in India can subscribe to this view of politics. Others, like Muslims or Christians, cannot ever commit their allegiance to India. So he gave the name of Hindutva to this Hinduized politics. Politics which is being Hinduized. All the main points of Savarkar's writings were available in his book of the same title, Hindutva. So we find religious politics in India has a long history. It has evolved through various stages. And some of the great religious thinkers, they have also contributed to the making of the religious politics, even though they are not reducible to be the votaries of politics. Think of religious revivalism. जहाँ थ्रू की religious politics टा gradually फदर ହେଇଛି. It is more than 100 years old. So this trend of revivalism towards the last decades of the 19th century. And this trend of the sentiment of revivalism, it ascends. It spread, particularly in Bengal and Maharashtra. And they have become the main centers of social reform movements. ये जो रिवाइवलिज्म ट्रेंड है विशेषकर महाराष्ट्र और बंगाल रे, it has the deep seat. That is why they have become the centers of reform movements. During the 19th century, nationalist awakening was molded through social and cultural movements. These are inspired and initiated by enlightened individualism. So the new mood of politics based on revivalism was first replacing the social movements, which sought to question certain practices within Hinduism, like child marriage, enforced widowhood, denial of education to women, etc. An instance of the ascendance of this revivalism and the decline of the reform movement was the treatment meted out to the National Social Conference started by Anna Day. And it was this National Social Conference, it is an umbrella organization of various social reform groups from different parts of the country. And it aimed at discussing, coordinating, and encouraging the reform movement all over the country. In drastic move in 1885 session of the Indian National Congress at Pune, Bal Gangadhar Tilak, of course, tried to be to make it this the very aims of this umbrella organization defunct. And soon after, Tilak instituted the Sarvajanik Ganesh Puja as a major mode of mass mobilization against colonialism. गणेश पूजा विशेष कर महाराष्ट्र सार्वजनिक करथिले बाल गंगाधर तिलक and it was used as a means of mass mobilization. गांधी प्राय कौन से फेस्टिवल को mass mobilization में यूज कर नथिले. That is the basic distinction. You know, notable figures and also nationalists like Bankim Chatterjee, Bal Gangadhar Tilak, and many others, they have joined the chorus of protest, and the argument was that the foreign rulers, the British, they have no right to interfere in the religious customs of the Hindus. So they have entered into this protest movement against this practice by the British rules. That they have no right to interfere in our religious customs. They cannot vitiate our religious processes. But in their argument against this British intervention, it was never made clear whether infant marriage of the girl, for example, was an internal feature of Hindu custom or a mere social practice prevailing in the Indian society. It was not made clear. So, in contrast to this, so far as the Gandhi's position is concerned, I mean, when British proposed a bill for the abolition of untouchability, so his view was that only undue interference in matters of religion are to be avoided. So Gandhi was very clear on this point that undue interference should be opposed. But the interference which is due, which was in favor of a ameliorated society, for example, this bill for the abolition of untouchability, it is for betterment. अस्पृश्यता निवारण करिया जदि गुड बिल आसला इट्स वेलकम थिंग. So only unnecessary interferences, undue interferences should be opposed to. So in his address to some members of the central legislature, that is in the month of January 1935, Gandhi said that even if the entire body of Hindu opinion was opposed to the removal of untouchability, he would still advise the central legislature as a secular body not to tolerate this attitude with subordinate. So he was very clear. The entire Hindu society the untouchability abolish kariba ko oppose karanti. He shall oppose this because abolition of untouchability is a positive step towards the establishment of an egalitarian society, of a just society. So far as Hindu revivalism is concerned, it is about the search for and glorification of spiritual superiority of Indian traditions. The thinkers and the philosophers, those who are associated with this Hindu revivalism, तमें हिंदू पुनर्जागरण revivalism को हम कौन कोई पर हिंदू पुनर्जागरण. So the thinkers associated with this, they try to find out this glory of Indian culture in Hindu symbols, Vedas, Indian traditions. They underline the significance of these factors in explaining nationalism. You know, there is no common content to this Hindu revivalism. It varied a great deal from both person to person. And Hindu revivalists, they have equated nationalist assertion with Hindu revivalism. ତାଙ୍କ ମତରେ ହିନ୍ଦୁ ରିଭାଇଭାଲିଜମଟା ହେଉଛି ଗୋଟେ ନ୍ୟାସନାଲିଷ୍ଟିକ ଆସର୍ସନ. ମାନେ ଭର୍ଚୁଆଲି ନ୍ୟାସନାଲିଜମ ଆଉ ହିନ୍ଦୁ ରିଭାଇଭାଲିଜମକୁ ସେମାନେ ଇକ୍ୱେଟ କରୁଥିଲେ. ତାଙ୍କ ଦୃଷ୍ଟିରେ ଏଟା ଗୋଟେ ସମାନ କନସେପ୍ଟ ଥିଲା. So in order to face the challenge of foreign rule, the foreign aggression, the Hindu revivalists aim to make Hinduism a homogeneous entity. So in their view, a unified Hindu entity will be devoid of non-violence or weak emotions. So, 3 regions of India were there in Bengal, Maharashtra, and northern India, where Hindu revivalism was pronounced in a very vigorous way. In Bengal, ସେମାନେ କହୁଥିଲେ ଯେ এই ଟ୍ରେଣ୍ଡଟା ଆଗ୍ରେସିଭ ହେବା ଆବଶ୍ୟକ, ନହେଲେ ଆମେ ଫରେନ୍ ରୁଟ୍ ହଟେଇ ପାରିବାନି. In Bengal, it was widespread. It was also intense. Sumit Sarkar has used a term to describe this Hindu revivalism in Bengal, that is intellectualized revivalism. It means that it has become a debate among the intellectuals. It was a talk among the literate people. And even magazines, newspapers, they got into it, their language of their expression was such that it may have little appeal to the common people. Bankim Chatterjee is another thinker of Hindu revivalism in Bengal. And in Bengal, this Hindu revivalism has three features. It highlighted and glorified some immemorial traditions of India. It explained and also described that one is an Indian only when one displays certain cultural characteristics. Otherwise, he is not an Indian. ଭାରତୀୟ ହେବାକୁ ହେଲେ ଗୋଟେ କଲଚରାଲ ଆଇଡେଣ୍ଟିଟି ନିଜ ବା କ୍ୟାରେକ୍ଟରିଷ୍ଟିକ୍ସକୁ ଡିସପ୍ଲେ କରିବାକୁ ପଡ଼ିବ. So it planted the seeds of cultural nationalism. Then also it underlined superiority of Lord Krishna to that of Jesus Christ. Bankim Chatterjee's novel Ananda Matha spread the message of patriotism. And this song Bande Mataram, which is an intrinsic to Ananda Matha, is a national song of India. Think of the state of Maharashtra, where also Hindu revivalism is quite having its influence. There is the religious revivalism. It had a more varied basis. You know, the most well-known festival is Ganesh Puja, through which this mass mobilization takes place. Then also in other parts of the country, like Punjab, Haryana, Western Uttar Pradesh, there is also this trace of Hindu revivalism. In the Indo-Gangetic plain, in the Indo-Gangetic plain in North India, Hindu revival has also asserted itself. And it was through their protest against cow slaughter, or say in support of Hindi in Devanagari script, that this trend was furthered. One scholar in North India, Gyan Pandey, he has shown in his writing mobilizing the Hindu community and Hindi, Hindu and Hindustan. He has spread these ideas of revivalism, Hindu revivalism. Then you must have heard about Arya Samaj movement by Swami Dayananda. And also at one level, it was a Protestant movement, and what also in the other sense of the term, it was a vehement attack against anything that was not properly aligned to Vedas. So it was highlighting the importance of Vedas. Swami Dayananda Saraswati's writing you must have heard, Satyartha Prakash, in this book also he launched a strong attack on non-Vedic religions like Islam, Christianity, Sikhism, etc. Side by side with the rise of political unrest. So there is emerging political temper based on this religious revivalism. କାରଣ ଏଗୁଡ଼ାକ କେବଳ ଗୋଟେ ରିଲିଜିୟସ୍ ସ୍ପିୟରକୁ ଲିମିଟେଡ୍ ହେଇକି ରହିଲାନି. There is rise of political unrest in the all India plane. For both India has a mission for the world to give to the materially oriented West the great spiritual resources of India and to enrich their impoverished civilization. And there are spiritual leaders which invoked the glories of ancient India, the superiority of Vedas and Vedanta, the incomparable nature of Indian tolerance. For example, the very address of Vivekananda to the World Parliament on Religions, where he highlights the importance of the Vedas, glorifies the Hindu tradition, and also spoke a lot about, with assertiveness, the Hindu Vedantic tradition and their superiority. Then let us come to Islamic perspective, so far as this politics and religion is concerned. The interventions among the Muslims starting roughly from the first half of the 19th century. And also initially they have not a very uniform character to them, so far as this trend is concerned. And from the viewpoint of the Muslims in India, some of these represent a retreat into the traditional fundamentalist Islam of rather primitive varieties. Shah Waliullah or Syed Ahmad of Bareilly and their lesser known followers like Haji Saritullah in Bengal or Maulavi of Faizabad, Maulavi Karamat Ali of Jaunpur, all in the first half of the 19th century were influenced by the Wahhabi movement. So they concentrated their attention on the un-Islamic practices prevalent among the Muslims, like the folk practices of joining each other's festivals, modes of salutation, greetings, common customs, and etiquettes influenced by the surrounding Hindu ethos. So they decry the practices of the Muslim community which has been influenced by the Hindu society. Another form of intervention also came later in the second half of 19th century. Shah Syed Ahmad Khan best represents this view. He was the founder of Aligarh movement. And this movement came to be known as Aligarh movement because it was started at Aligarh. And the purpose of this Aligarh movement was to spread political consciousness among Indian Muslims. So Shah Syed founded Mohammedan Anglo-Oriental College at Aligarh. And later on, it was developed to this present day Aligarh Muslim University, AMU. You know, whatever may be the difference, which can be discerned with this respect of the historical time, internal thrust and intentions or motivations, there are certain common features and consequences of these interventions. The more salient features are first, a well thought out and planned move towards addressing the people directly instead of relying on or looking to the court or the aristocracy to defend Islam. Secondly, these movements they sought to bring a shift from their side of theological arguments addressed to the Lonen for political appeals to some form of mobilization of the people on broad themes. And thirdly, there was a consistent effort to reconstruct a healthier version of Islam. And these two trends they came about due to the intervention of the traditionalists and modernists. So these are a few instances, for example, Hindu revivalism or the Islamic movements, which had impacted the Indian political trends. The scope of religious politics broadly encompasses natural issues like religion, culture, etc. And religious politics, it has gradually evolved since the last decade of the 19th century. Features of Hindu nationalism generally included placing of glory of Indian culture in Hindus, symbols like Veda, Indian tradition, spiritual spirit of India. And the beginning was made with social reforms and subsequently found support from scholars and nationalists. And Hindu revivalism secured its best in Bengal, Maharashtra, and northern Indian region. The Islamic perspective drew its source from the historic past and attempted to unite the community by constructing a healthier version of Islam. And gradually, what is being observed that the differences between these religious trends, this led to conflicting perspectives. So, up till now, we shall find that the religious groups they have started assuming very dominant role also in the sphere of politics. So, Since ancient days through medieval India in society, the issue of religious politics has become a continuous phenomenon. So we have reached a stage where religion and politics cannot be kept apart. Then we can think in terms of ethnicity and nation state. I think in some part of the discussion previously we have covered this. Generally, ethnicity is considered as the mobilization of a group of people, those who share common attributes like culture, language, religion, history, जोटा कि हमें previous class मानकरे discuss culture पे बहुत है ସେମାନେ ଗୋଟେ compact ଗୋଟେ region ଭିତରୁ ଆସିଥାଇ ପାରନ୍ତି ଗୋଟେ common culture ଭିତରୁ ସେମାନେ ଆସିଥାଇ ପାରନ୍ତି they have also common history they might have used also common language so much of factors and these are mostly the ethnic factors जोटा कि the concept of ethnicity covers and they have been mobilized and this mobilization can be either of a single attribute or this can be also formed on more attributes धरନ୍ତୁ ଆମେ जो attributes ଟା ଦେଖିଲେ religion history language either ଗୋଟେ single attribute ଉପରେ ବେस କରିକି mobilization ହେଇପାରେ କିମ୍ବା more than one or many attributes also can form the basis of this ethnic mobilization. For example, mobilization on the basis of language, religion, known as communalism in Indian context. Language, caste, or tribe is considered as ethnic mobilizations. Dipankar Gupta, one scholar who differentiates between the ethnicity and communalism. Dipankar Gupta argues that ethnicity necessarily denotes mobilization of a group in relation to another with reference to the nation state, the territory, and the sovereignty. And an ethnic group either proclaims itself to be real adherent of the faith in the territory of a nation or wants to set up a sovereign nation or on questions of loyalty of another group. A nation state is a sovereign geographical entity and the foundation is the shared sentiment of a community based on history, culture, language, religion, or civilization. Of course, very strangely, some scholars they argue that India is not a nation state. They argue that the basis of the foundation of a nation state is single nation or nationality. In such a society, people share a single common language, culture, or a common religion. But since our society is multilingual, multicultural, multi-religious, that is why these scholars say that these constitute large number of nationalities. It is of course their argument. So they consider that we may consider it to be a multinational state. But strictly speaking, this multinational state can point to a state like USSR. But other scholars, they argue that in spite of these diversities, we have single nation state. So what can constitute the perspectives to study ethnicity? There are basically three perspectives to explain this question: the primordial, the instrumentalist, and the perspective which combines both the primordial and the instrumentalist perspective. I think we have also discussed these types of perspectives in some other reference. Because according to the primordial approach, the ethnic differences among the people are given. They are inherited by them. So these differences are bound to take the form of ethnic conflict between various groups. The advocates of the instrumentalist approach, they believe that the ethnic differences are not given as the primordialists say. They are created by the elites, who could be politicians, teachers, religious leaders. ଗୋଟେ ସୋସାଇଟିର ଏମାନେ ହିଁ ଇଲିଟ୍ସ ଏବଂ ସେମାନେ ସେ ଆଟ୍ରିବ୍ୟୁଟ୍ ଗୁଡାକୁ କ୍ରିଏଟ୍ କରିଥାନ୍ତି। ତେଣୁ members of that ethnic society, they have not drawn those attributes as given characteristics. Rather, they are created by the elites of that particular society. This is one argument by the instrumentalist, the advocates of the instrumentalist approach. So some of the other approach says that, which combine the attributes both of the primordialist approach and also the instrumentalist approach. This perspective, they believes that both these perspectives, primordial and instrumentalists, they are unable to explain the issue of ethnicity. So they divide this issue into bipolarity. So they advocate that the attributes advocated by both the primordialists and the instrumentalists, they reside to some extent in common, in combination. So this is regarding the perspective of the study of ethnicity. The primordialist, the instrumentalists, and the third perspective combines both the attributes. Then manifestation of ethnicity. You see, the understanding that the ethnicity will take a backseat in the face of development, which would follow as a result of this Mahalanobis model, boosting the process of nation state building. It was contested. It was argued that such a model of nation building ignored the smaller nationalities. They could not protect the interest of the smaller nationalities in the country. Rather, this model is an imposition on them. So, the identities, culture, history, aspiration of the smaller nationalities in the country, they are neglected. They are not taken into consideration under such a model. So far as the ethnic challenge, so when the ethnic identities or the groups they feel ignored, they come up with the protest movements. We have already, in some of the previous discussions, referred to these ethnic movements and all that. So far as the protest movements are concerned, the demand for the rights, the demand for the establishment of their own identity or asserting their own identity, that this ethnic challenge, it can challenge naturally in the process nation building activities. So the scholars they have found out that the ethnic challenge can take the shape of autonomous movement, demand for secession, they can take the form of insurgency, and also they can take the form of conflicts and riots on the basis of identity markers like tribe, caste, language, religion, etc. So, ethnic challenge to nation building can take these forms. It may be in the form of autonomous movements or movement for autonomy. It may take the form of demand for secession. It may take the form of insurgency, or it may take the form of conflict and riot on the basis of identity markers like tribe, caste, or language or religion, etc., or region. Actually, I'm just देखिए autonomous movement. I mean, autonomous movements mean movement for autonomy. स्वाधीनता में जो आंदोलन ସେମାନେ କରୁଛନ୍ତି ethnic tribes, we have referred to some of these things in some of the previous chapters, like the ethnic groups in Northeast India, like the demand for autonomy, the demand for secession. ସେ କହିଲେ ନାଇଁ ନାଇଁ ଆମେ ମେନ୍ ଅଲଗା ହେଇଛୁ, ଆମକୁ otherwise we are feeling ignored. Insurgency. এই তিনটা ଏକ form of ethnic challenge or ethnic manifestation. They are also called self-determination movements. And it needs to be noted that these forms of manifestation do not follow a uniform sequence or occurrence in the country. And from 1950s onwards, the conflicts based on these, they have been common in various regions of the country. And another marker, that is language, also constitutes the basis of this linguistic movements. The linguistic reorganization of the states created the states on the basis of some common linguistic traits. But there continued the conflicts of the basis of religion, native immigrant dichotomy, dialect or linguistic controversy in many parts of the country. So demand for the autonomy within the states and for the secession from the country, it cropped up. ଗୋଟେ ନିର୍ଦ୍ଦିଷ୍ଟ ଷ୍ଟେଟ୍ ଭିତରେ ଗୋଟେ ନିର୍ଦ୍ଦିଷ୍ଟ ଏଥନିକ୍ ଗ୍ରୁପ ସେମାନେ ଡିମାଣ୍ଡ କରିବେ ଯେ ଆମକୁ ଅଟୋନୋମସ୍ ରିଜନ କରିଦିଆଯାଉ, କିମ୍ବା ବେଳେ ବେଳେ ସେମାନେ କହିବେ ଯେ ଆମକୁ କଣ୍ଟ୍ରିରୁ ଆମେ ଅଲଗା ହେଇଯିବୁ, secessionist activity. So this type of demands, agitations, they have cropped up. And most of the times, it also resulted in violence. So what should be the response of the state? It प्रकार गोटे एथनिक अपसर्ज हेले लाइक योर ऑटोनॉमी मूवमेंट, डिमांड फॉर सेसेशन, इंसर्जेंसी, conflicts and riot, a situation state कौन करिवो? How should the state apparatus respond? It depends on the nature and the context of political situation. And the general pattern of state response prior a situation what state कौन करे? It resorted to coercion, accommodation, causing the division within the ethnic movements, then appeasement and patronage to particular sections of the leadership of the movement. ତେଣୁ ଏଇ ପ୍ରକାର ମୁଭମେଣ୍ଟକୁ ଦବେଇବା ପାଇଁ ଆଇଦର ସେ ଷ୍ଟେଟ୍ କଣ କରିବ, ଇଟ୍ କ୍ୟାନ୍ ଟେକ୍ ରିସୋର୍ଟ ଟୁ କୋଏରସନ୍, ବାଧ୍ୟବାଧକତା ବା କୋଏରସନ୍ ବା ପ୍ରେସର ଆପ୍ଲାଏ କରିବ, ପଲିସି ବା ଆକୋମୋଡେସନ୍ ନେଇପାରେ, କିମ୍ବା ସେ ଏଥନିକ୍ ମୁଭମେଣ୍ଟରେ ଗୋଟେ ଡିଭିଜନ୍ କ୍ରିଏଟ୍ କରିବାକୁ ଚେଷ୍ଟା କରିପାରେ ସୋ ଦ୍ୟାଟ୍ ଦି ମୁଭମେଣ୍ଟ କ୍ୟାନ୍ ବି ୱିକେଣ୍ଡ, କିମ୍ବା ପଲିସି ବା ଆपिଜମେଣ୍ଟ ସନ୍ତୁଷ୍ଟିକରଣ, ତୁଷ୍ଟିକରଣ ନୀତି ସେମାନଙ୍କ ଡିମାଣ୍ଡକୁ କିଛି ପର୍ସନରେ ଗ୍ରହଣ କରିଦେଇପାରେ। One scholar, Paul Brass, he argued that in 1950s and 60s, central government had pursued unwritten rules towards this ethnic conflicts. So, कौन सी written rules इसमें नहीं है how to respond. And what are those unwritten rules towards this ethnic conflicts? Not considering the demands for the political recognition of the religious communities. No concession to the demand of the linguistic, regional, or other culturally defined groups. No concession to the cultural groups in conflict unless both sides support it substantially. For example, it was not until the demand for a Punjabi Suba got the support of the leadership in Haryana for a separate Hindi-speaking area that the Punjabi Suba, the state of Punjab, was created. So, in nutshell, few cases of ethnicity in India can be discussed in a precise way. Several examples in different parts of the country, for example, Northeast. विशेषकर नॉर्थ ईस्ट उत्तर पूर्वांचल में एथनिक मूवमेंट्स आर वेरी हाई because there are distinct histories, geographical location, diverse ethnic compositions, almost in all the states of Northeast India. So it includes also insurgency movements. And the elements of the insurgency are present in almost all states. It took the most strident form in Nagaland and Mizoram. There are forces in most of the states of Northeast India which believe that they are not Indians. Their territories have been merged with India, possibly, without the consent. It is their feeling. So they would have preferred their own sovereign nation state. For example, the insurgent groups in Nagaland, they did not accept the sometimes Indian constitution. Its sixth schedule meant for the Northeast boycotted the first general election held in 1952 and declared to have set up their own sovereign state in exile. And one umbrella organization also set up under the leadership of the NSCN, that is National Socialist Council of Nagaland. And they started questioning the concept of the nation state in India. And also the areas of Assam which were inhabited by Khasis, Jaintias and Garos, it had also witnessed the movement for an autonomous state in 1960s. And it resulted in the formation of a separate state of Meghalaya in 1972. Still, there are agitations for the creation of autonomous states like Bodoland, Karbi Anglong. So, these are few instances of ethnic movements in the northeastern country, northeast India. Also, in most strident opposition to the notion of India as a nation state was also coming from the South India much before the country was formed and Free India was formed. The Dravidian movement of Tamil Nadu became the representative of this in the region. Originally, the self-respect movement and later getting articulated in form of the Justice Party, DK and DMK, the Dravid and nationalism, questioned the dominant notion of the nationalism and nation state in the country on three grounds, that is religion, language, and caste. And the pioneer of this Dravidian nationalism, E.V. Ramaswamy Naikar, which is popularly known as Periyar, he argued that the dominant nationalism in India was articulated by the Congress, which is based on the Hindu religion or Brahminism, Hindi language, and high castes, especially the Brahmins. So on these grounds, they have started a demand for secession. Anti-Hindi agitations were there in the southern belt. So the thrust on the Dravidian culture deterred the growth of ethnicity in the lines of Hindu communalism in Tamil Nadu. And unlike other states of South India, the basis of challenge to the Hindu communalism in Tamil Nadu, it had been ideological. Then another case also case study can be case of the Punjab, the ethnicity in Punjab. It got manifested mainly in the form of autonomous movement and insurgency. The Akali leadership argued that the areas of Punjab which are inhabited by the people whose mother tongue was Punjabi and most of them followed Sikh religion should be given an autonomous province of their own. So the Akali leadership followed three prolonged strategy to mobilize the support: constitutional, infiltration, and agitational. So the first strategy is constitutional, which involved the constitutional means like memoranda, rallies, marches, etc. Then the second strategy allowed a large number of the Akali Dal members to penetrate the Congress organization and influence the decision making. And the last strategy, that the agitational strategy, often led to violence. In fact, there are also two groups within the Akali Dal, one represented by Sant Fateh Singh, giving the socio-economic explanations, and another was represented by Master Tara Singh, who justified the demand for Punjab Suba on religious grounds. So there are two types of explanations of the Punjab crisis. As the developments there came to be addressed during the 1970s and 80s, the socio-economic and political. The first is provided by the economists and the Marxist scholars, and the main representative of this framework are Sucha Singhil, K.C. Singhal, Harish Kumar Puri, Joyce Pettigrew, M.S. Dhami, Javid Alam, and Gurharpal Singh. They argue that the roots of the Punjab crisis lie in the social and economical problems of the people, especially in the wake of the Green Revolution, unable to meet the cost in agriculture, along with the rising unemployment, the crisis of the Sikh identity caused by the impact of consumerism, and modern values provided a fertile ground for the rise of militancy. This is socio-economic explanation. What about the political explanation? The scholars, those who support political explanation, for example, Paul Brass, he criticized this socio-economic explanation as inadequate. They argue that the Punjab crisis has been the outcome of the political manipulation of the religion and the problem of the people by the politicians. So according to these scholars, those who support the political explanation, it has actually been the manipulation of the services of Bhindranwal by Indira Gandhi in the context of changing center-state relations, which gave birth to militants in Punjab. Then another case study also there, you can find Jammu and Kashmir, and the autonomy movement and insurgency in J&K is linked to the geographical and historical and religious factors. Before the accession of the state to Indian Union, the political leadership in the state had been divided on the issues of its relationship to nation state. While King Hari Singh, who wanted to retain it as an independent state, opposed the accession of Jammu and Kashmir to India. The most popular leader of the state, Sheikh Abdullah, wanted it to be merged with India. But once the state got acceded to India and Sheikh Abdullah became the prime minister of the state, the post which existed only in this state, and later on it was converted to the post of chief minister, he started wavering on the issue of Jammu and Kashmir's accession to India. So he formed the plebiscitary front, which provoked the central government to depose and imprison him from 1953 till 1964. So there have been demands for autonomy within the state of Jammu and Kashmir from two regions, Jammu and Ladakh. For the non-Kashmiris, for a substantial part of the population. So the state of Jammu and Kashmir has also joined other states for the regional autonomy in terms of changes. And involvement of Pakistan in the insurgency movement has posed challenge to Indian nation state. So, to sum up this chapter, ethnicity is one of the challenges to which Indian nation state is confronted with. It is manifested in the form of self-determination movements, autonomy movements, secessionist movements, insurgencies, and ethnic conflicts and violences and riots. The model of nation-state building was contested by the smaller nationalities in various parts of the country, like Nagas, Mizos in Northeast, Dravidian movement in the Tamil Nadu, Jammu and Kashmir and Punjab issues, and the number of ethnic conflicts continue to grow in the country. So this is more or less a brief discussion on ethnicity and nation state. Now, within half an hour, we shall come to the last concluding chapter. That is democracy and development and assessment. If we discuss about democracy and development in context of India, and assess both the concepts of democracy and development, we can have two contradictory points. One, that the democracy and development have succeeded, and the other point of view is that they have failed. And having discussed very briefly the evolution of democracy and models and strategies of development in India, we can further this discussion on democracy in India and also its relations with the development process. What about democracy first? We find that following independence, India has adopted a democratic model, a democratic setup, a democratic system of government. And this democracy has a process of evolution starting from the British days. ଆମର ଗଣତାନ୍ତ୍ରିକ ପଦ୍ଧତିଟା ଆମର ବ୍ରିଟିଶ ରାଜ ସମୟରୁ ଆରମ୍ଭ ହୋଇଛି. We have provisions of democracy in acts like Government of India Act 99, that is Morley Minto Act, then 1919, which is more known as Montagu-Chelmsford Act, then Government of India Act 1935. So we have certain elements of democratic process. Then after independence, also in the Constituent Assembly from 1946 to 1949, ଆମର 3 ବର୍ଷ ଯୋଉ more or less 3 years, Constituent Assembly କାମ ହେଲା ଗୋଟେ democratic country ପାଇଁ ସମ୍ବିଧାନ ତିଆରି କରିବା India ପାଇଁ. Democracy was introduced in the post-independent India in 1950. Which established the Indian Republic. We have gone for a parliamentary form of democracy. And we have made our democracy based on the principle of universal adult suffrage, periodic election, and also we have established through local self-governments the village level administration in the light of Gandhian principles, think in terms of Panchayat Raj institutions and all that. And mostly there are two models of indices regarding democracy, one related to institutional, minimal, procedural democracy, and the other one is to substantive or effective democracy. The procedural democracy views democracy in terms of presence of institutions of democracy, procedures of election, political parties, universal adult franchise, leadership, etc. But the substantive view of democracy does not consider the institutional, procedural, or electoral democracy as a comprehensive indicator. They consider that electoral democracy is minimalist, which is marked by a large number of factors which are inimical to substantive democracy. So let us first come to what is procedural democracy. The advocates of procedural democracy, they believe that democracy in India has been successful. And what is the criteria of this assessment that it is successful? Their participation and competition. These are indicated by the frequency of the elections in India and competition among political parties to contest elections. And the advocates of this approach are very buoyant about the success of the electoral politics in India. They say that the election procedure, the way elections are conducted, very successful, which is taken as the general pattern of success of democracy. They infer the dominant trends in the election in terms of the turnout and the percentage of vote or use of statistical method, correlations, coefficients, or the regression analysis. They see the multivariable relationship of the turnout percentage and participation of the socio-economic data in particular constituencies. And this analysis also on other grounds, it is based on survey, and they take into account the socio-economic and political factors of a particular region, which is called ecological analysis. So during the past 15 years, following independence, scholars like Rajani Kothari, Paul Brass, M. Frenda, Myron Winner, they used the survey method to conduct election studies. So all kinds of factors like crime, caste, religion, they become effective in elections. The survey method has been carried forward by several scholars. And during the last 7 years, particularly past 2 or 3 decades, the psychologists, they have also used it. Election forecast psychologist and all that. They have also used these methods. So the procedural democracy, it was meant to contribute to the nation building in India. The focus of studies on democracy in India in the earlier decades following independence had been to examine as to how it helped in the nation building through the introduction of universal adult suffrage, and periodic elections. And it was also known as modernization theory. And modernization theory claimed that the developing countries underwent a process of modernization whose ultimate aim would be stable democracy. And this should be accompanied with the socio-economic modernization, organization, spread of mass media, education, wealth, and equality. And it was believed that the development in India would strengthen democracy and the divisions based on caste, religion, etc., would gradually disappear. Of course, all these high aspirations they have been belied. In the following years, that didn't happen. Development process in India could not strengthen democracy. The divisions based on caste, religion, etc., they didn't disappear. So, some scholars like Sally Harrison they apprehended that there is a dangerous decade in India in the 1960s in face of recurrent linguistic and ethnic violence. Procedural democracy रो जो aspirations में ये main aims थिला aspirations थिला it has been belied, it has failed. Violence in different regions of the country it further escalated in the 1960s and 70s. The defeat of the Congress in several states in 1967 assembly elections and the imposition of emergency in the country during 75-77. They are examples of people's discontentment. So the predominance of the modernization approach cast in the behavioralist of structural functional analysis accorded priority to the question whether India would survive as a nation state or not. So the critique of procedural democracy is provided by substantive democracy. So let us come to see that what the advocates of substantive democracy, they are furthering their arguments. They say that procedural democracy emphasizes on elections. Electoral democracy is minimal democracy. In their opinion, free and fair elections, universal franchise, political parties, pressure groups, which are the essential elements of procedural democracy, they are not really sufficient conditions for democracy. Though they are necessary, they are not sufficient. So substantive advocates of substantive democracy, they pleaded that democracy has to be located in society and it must be taken out of the institutional mode. So these advocates of substantive democracy, they have emphasized upon what is called social agenda of democratization. Democracy has to be grounded in the reality of the society, apart from the participation and competition in the elections. So we shall find that during past few decades in India, substantive democracy also has found a significant place. And the evaluation of this substantive democracy is to be made in relation to the role of the state on the issues concerning the nation state, secularism, welfareism, and development in India. And also the role of the state regarding these issues in the context of globalization. So Niroja Jayal, one scholar, he argues that there are two types of arguments regarding the relationship between the state and democracy. One is that there can be no democracy without an effective state. Which can exist when there is a strong civil society to counter the authoritarianism. In the absence of the universal criterion of citizenship, the particularistic issues and interests, they can also take away the project of democracy. So, in the opinion of Miraza, the Indian state is an interventionist state. It is an interventionist state. It intervenes, whose thrust has been developmental rather than welfare state. Another important ingredient of this substantive democracy is civil society, existence of civil society, Nagarika Samaj. In India, there are two viewpoints on civil society. One is that it considers all associations and collective actions as civil society. And to only those associations which take up to issues of universal significance, not sectarian, and whose foundation is secular, universal, they are considered only civil society. Of course, besides these two views, recently there is another view which is taking momentum. The debate between communitarianism and the liberal, the relationship between the individuals and the communities, within and between them. Quite recently, this debate is also coming up. Then another important issue is the rise of identity politics. Dalits, other backward classes, women, tribals, ethnicity, environmental issues, that is the new social movements, which we already unit touch kariche, and the inability of the discourse which privileges democracy with the elections which have necessitated the focus on substantive democracy. So these are certain issues also which have necessitated the focus on substantive democracy. So this has been viewed both as a challenge to the nation state and as an increasingly democratic central contents of the country, with the understanding that India is becoming more democratic, a position which have been opted by scholars like Asutosh Varsi. With the introduction of the 73rd and 74th Amendment, you must be knowing very important amendments. We have several times discussed about that. The amendments relating to the rural and urban local self-government, 73rd to the rural side, 74th Amendment relating to the urban local governments. The decentralization has been democratized. The scope of democracy has expanded to include women, OBCs, Dalits, because there are provision of reservation in the local self-government systems in Panchayat Raj and also in the urban local self-government. For example, the transfer of 29 subjects to the local bodies, you must have gone through this 11th and 12th schedules which have been added. And 29 subjects transferred to local bodies, it has added to democratic decentralization. But of course, the critical part is that the increasing role of crimes, money, it has further eroded the credibility of the local self-government, the local level democracy decentralization. Still, wherever the public action has coexisted with the institutions of local self-government, the institutions of local self-government have functioned democratically. So, assessment of democracy, the procedure of democracy, results, consequence of democracy, it has been done at national level, state level, district level, and also the functioning of democracy at these levels have been independent of each other. There has been the top button, not the bottom up approach to democracy in India. One author, Atul Kohli, he has covered three levels, that is nation, state, and district in his book, Democracy and Discontent, India's Crisis of Governability. Scholars like O'Donnell, they have underlined the need to see the differences within democracy. In Rajni Kothari's opinion, the Indian state played significant role in building democracy in the first 2 decades following independence. It has implemented welfare schemes and also development programs. Though it was a moderate state, then Indian democracy during this phase, it was marked it was marked by accommodation of all interests and building consensus. So, what about the process of development? Development is a current theme in the discussion on democracy and social change. And this concept of development has been used mainly by the sociologists and political scientists on the one hand, and by the economists on the other. Sociologists and political scientists use it as a modernization paradigm. And the changes were considered as developmental and modernization, which indicated towards the process of nation building or nation state building. But for economists, development means the growth in terms of per capita income and GNP. And the modernization theory of development, apart from the factors mentioned above, has also considered the per capita income and GNP indices of development. And Amartya Sen has provided an alternate model of development. For him, per capita income and the GNP are important, but not enough indices of development. So the debate on the relationship between democracy and development, it has dealt with two questions. Are they compatible with each other or are they inimical? Amartya Sen has provided an unequivocal perspective on development and democracy. They are not incompatible actually. On a solar question, they are incompatible. They do not go each side by side with each other. But Amartya Sen says they are not incompatible. Rather, democracy and development are complementary to each other. Democracy is possible if people in a society have the entitlements and they possess capabilities which enable them to be part of the democratic process. For example, freedom, which is an essential ingredient of democracy. It promotes development in terms of entitlements and the capability of the people. So development is also contingent upon democracy. So I think with this, we can conclude the discussion on this particular course, that is MPS-3, that is India, Democracy and Development. And we shall find that topics are quite interesting and they also evoke a great deal of interest among the readers. We have started with the chapters like Legacy of National Movement, Debates and Models of Development, Constitution and Social Transformation, Diversity and Pluralism, Inequality, that is caste and class, Political Economy of Development, Structure and Growth of Economy, Bureaucracy, Police, Army, Legal System, Judiciary, Federalism, Devolution of Power and Local Self-Government, Political Parties, Participation, Workers and Peasant Movements, Media and Public Policy, Interest Groups, then Policy Making, Identity Politics, and also Civil Society, and also the social movements, and also various voluntary action groups and NGOs. Then also we have covered very important discussions on human development, health, education and social security, gender and development, regional imbalances, migration and development, environment and sustainable development, economic reforms and globalization, religious politics, ethnicity and nation state, then democracy and development in India and assessment. So, since there is a time constraint, in a very short span of time, we have to cover so important chapters. I have only touched upon the important points, and I am very, very thankful for your cooperation and patient listening. So now I end up my discussion and wish you all the best. So you can go through the details from your texts and also you can refer to other books so far as these chapters are concerned. Okay, thank you. Goodbye. Wish you all the best. So I'm now, it's already 7 o'clock. So now I'm leaving the platform.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Namaskar, sir.
Namaste ji, Namaste ji. Thank you for your cooperation and patient listening. Ram, Jai.